It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Rob Farrett. Along with many other federal funding freezes from the Trump administration, U.S. Department of Agriculture grants that fund tribal colleges and universities in Wisconsin and elsewhere have vanished, putting students that rely on them in jeopardy. A report from ProPublica found that around 20 college students, for example, at the College of Menominee Nation in Kashina, rely on grants from the Federal Agriculture Department to cover their tuition. Unless other money can be found, those cuts are leaving those students with just a few weeks left on their campus. These cuts come as tribal colleges are already dealing with decades of limited funding from Congress without much support to build and maintain their campuses. Matt Krupnick is a reporter for ProPublica who's been tracking some of the effects of federal cuts on tribal colleges and their students. Matt, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Hi, thanks for having me.
The basics to start, Matt, where do these tribal colleges and universities in Wisconsin and around the country get their funding from?
Well, so they're primarily funded by the federal government. These USDA grants go to very specific programs and scholarships, and so that's where they've seen the cuts thus far.
And you report that even before this conversation about these grant freezes, there's a concern about underfunding of tribal campuses, Congress not necessarily meeting their funding obligations over the years, over the decades. Paint us a picture.
Yeah, that's right. It's in the 1970s, Congress guaranteed that tribal colleges would get a certain amount of money, and that would be happened. They should be getting $250 million more a year based on what the law specifies.
And that what does that mean for their operations?
Well, I visited quite a few tribal colleges working on that project, and you see it on the campuses. Like the buildings are falling apart. They can't update buildings to meet needs for modern science programs, for instance. And so it makes it really tough. They can't pay their faculty what they should be getting. They can't be competitive on salaries. So you see it in all kinds of ways. Yeah.
Take us through the history of these grants in question now, going through the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Right. Yeah. So the tribal colleges and universities were added to the list of land grant universities in 1994, which made them eligible for U.S. Department of Agriculture funding that helps mainly with agricultural programs. But, for tribal colleges, that also has a lot to do with food research and food sovereignty programs. And for a lot of the colleges, there are scholarship programs that, basically enable students to go to school. Without those, they can't pay for tuition or for books or for transportation or for housing. So, it's a really big deal for a lot of students.
How did these students and these campuses find out that this money was drying up abruptly?
Yeah, it really was abrupt. A lot of them, the colleges found out when they tried to log into the federal system to get reimbursed for expenses that they had already paid. And they found that, for no apparent reason, the money had been frozen, the funds had been frozen. And so they, first, some of them were told that it was a technical problem, which wasn't the case. In reality, some of these funds had just been frozen because the scholarships, for instance, had the word equity in the name. So not all of these funds have been frozen for all the colleges, only the ones that had the words in the title that the Trump administration has deemed to be problematic.
Right. And the equity is part of a drive to cut anything involving diversity, equity, or inclusion programs. This is a little different. The word equity in that 1994 law said, correct me if I'm wrong, Matt, who said we're going to treat these tribal colleges with equity compared to public land grant universities. Do I have that right?
Yeah, well, yeah, equity is used in all kinds of different ways, and so and in some of the cases with these scholarships, it does apply to diversity. In some cases, it doesn't, and so. A lot of the colleges have told me it just seems like the Trump administration did a Control F to find any instance of the words equity or diversity or inclusion. And so that swept up all kinds of programs into that net.
Have you found any explanation from the federal government now as to why this decision was made and whether this is a temporary freeze on this funding or if it has a future?
No, that's one thing these days. It's very difficult to get any answers, whether it's me asking or whether it's one of the tribal colleges. No one can get any answers out of the federal government on this stuff. So I know the colleges are still pushing for this, and I know USDA is taking it under consideration, but so far there's been no movement on it, partly because there are very few people working in the federal government these days.
And what have you heard about the impact this will have on students at tribal colleges?
Yeah, so I spoke to one student at the College of Menominee Nation, and she basically said, she wasn't sure if she'd be able to continue going to school because she really relies on the scholarship that's paid by the federal government to attend classes. A lot of these students at these tribal colleges drive long distances or have to deal with childcare or have other concerns that really, sort of put them on the edge of instability financially. And so these scholarships mean a lot to them, and they may not be able to attend.
Matt, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
That's Matt Krupnick, reporter for ProPublica. He's been tracking some of the effects of federal cuts on tribal colleges and their students. For a local perspective on these federal cuts to tribal colleges, Chris Caldwell is with us, president of the College of Menominee Nation near Kashina. Chris, thanks a lot for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Chris, when did it hit you and your colleagues and students that this funding that you were expecting, some of it was already spent, I understand. When did it hit you that this wasn't coming?
We had seen that with the original federal funding freeze memo that was issued by the Office of Management and Budget. Pretty much all of our federal grants were froze at that time. We didn't know what was going on back in January. And so we started reaching out to our agency contacts and even our elected officials' offices, just looking for answers. And eventually, as I understand it, through some of those court proceedings, some of the funding started to become available again, but there were a few projects that we still haven't been able to access.
That USDA grant that is funding, among other things, some scholarships. Do you know where that stands now?
No, that is our USDA Next Gen grant. It's a $9 million workforce development grant we had secured a year and a half ago that goes towards student scholarships, internships, curriculum development, and also partnering with communities and other institutions focused on food, agriculture, natural resources, and health. And so the only thing we've received so far from USDA is a notice that funding is paused, and that's been since January, that the only notice we've received.
So what does that mean for your operations on a day-to-day basis now?
Well, it does impact positions here. There were specific positions that were helping to facilitate all that work, a large body of work. But also that means that, like mentioned, one of our students, internships do help keep our students, proceeding through their academic journey. Oftentimes they determine whether they are able to stay full-time or not, pay for this or that. And so over the past couple months, as we advocate for getting those programs restored, we're also looking at other ways to support our students. We do not offer loans here at the College of Menominee Nation. We want to make sure our students graduate without debt so they can continue forward. But that does make it a little more difficult for us. We don't have the same type of resources or assets that other larger institutions have that they could switch to. So we're still struggling to find ways. We have found some solutions, but we don't know how long this will continue. And if that's the case, our resources will continue to dwindle.
This is the time of year when current students are probably deciding their classes for the fall. Incoming students planning, making their plans to go to college. What are you hearing from current and prospective students about how this affects their planning for September?
Oh, for sure. Many of our students, they come to school, but they're also working students. They have jobs that sometimes raising families. And so there's a lot of concern across the board to begin with, juggling all of those responsibilities. But the uncertainty and the, whatever is going on in the government that's impacting us, that doesn't help them, make better decisions. They're having to also consider those impacts. And I write regular updates to our student body and our college as a whole, just to keep them updated of what we know. But, our knowledge only goes so far. And when we had visited our elected officials' offices back in first week of February, or some students came with us, shared their stories with Baldwin, Johnson, and Weed's office. And, at that time, they didn't have many answers as well. So I'm not exactly sure when answers will be coming.
Big picture, there's this funding issue, as we heard, underfunding from Congress for commitments under passed laws to tribal colleges. In our last minute or so, make the case for providing funding for tribal campuses.
Yeah, definitely. Historically underfunded. Tribal land grant institutions were created back in the 1990s to serve tribal nations that chartered them. And the reason we were provided with specific funding programs was because other land grants that were established are actually given land. So there's a whole history behind that. But even with the funding we do receive, we've been able to generate large impacts for our tribal nation communities we serve and rural surrounding communities. We just released an economic impact study based on last year's fiscal year numbers, and we generate a $16 million impact and support almost 360 jobs in this region of Menominee and Shawano County. So we have a large impact, and if we were more properly supported, I have no doubt we could make an even bigger impact.
Chris, thanks again for joining us.
Yes, Waiwanan, thank you.
That's Chris Caldwell, president of the College of Menominee Nation near Kashina. We also heard from reporter Matt Krupnick with ProPublica about funding cuts for tribal campuses. Coming up, a wildfire in Green Lake County burned through 750 acres 2 weeks ago. We'll get a first-hand account from the first fire department on the scene.
Well, as the fire was going through the marsh, due to the wind, it was moving quite rapidly. We had flames anywhere from 10 to 30 feet tall at times.
That's next here on WPR News. It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Rob Farrett. 2 weeks ago today, a 750-acre wildfire broke out in south-central Wisconsin, launching a multi-agency response to contain 30-foot flames.
A wildfire ripped through hundreds of acres of a wildlife area.
Continuing coverage of a massive fire in Green Lake County this morning.
2 residences have been evacuated so far.
Are at the scene. They're battling flames right now.
It's all just ash, completely torched.
A massive brush fire in Green Lake County has now been contained.
In Green Lake County, fast winds pushed the Big Island Fire through the White River Marsh State Wildlife Area on a high fire danger day. The cause of that fire is still under investigation. Today, we're learning more about the multi-agency response from 2 responders. Doug Dewhurst is the interim fire chief with the City of Berlin Fire Department in Green Lake County. Lucas Schmidt is forestry supervisor for the Department of Natural Resources in Wapaka. Lucas, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Glad to be here, Rob.
And Doug, thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Doug, I want to start with you and walk us through when you first heard the report of this fire. Your department was the first on the scene. What happens between getting that notification and summoning the crew?
We got paged out between 4 and 4:30, and on the page it said that we had a marsh fire and it was nearing some buildings on District Half Road. So we proceeded to the fire station, the crews, and I stated to everybody that we're heading right to District Half Road because our first objective is to protect buildings and and houses. So that's where we headed.
Now we end up with this fire, 750 acres it consumes. Doug, bring us to that moment when you're first pulling up toward that fire. Paint us a picture of what you saw.
Well, as we're heading out of town, we can see the black smoke coming up into the sky, and we can tell it's more than a couple acres that it came in as. So we're heading down. We get to District Half Road where the buildings are. We take all of our equipment down there because it sounded like it was really close to the buildings. It was a little ways off, so we were able to set up and get prepared for it. As we did that, we turned the other trucks around and took them out of the driveway and back up on the County Road D because the fire was fast approaching there, and we knew we had to try to do our best to stop it so it wouldn't jump the highway. And then about that time, the DNR showed up, and they then kind of took over.
And Lucas, let's bring the DNR into the story now. How does the State Department of Natural Resources get informed about the wildfire and know that, hey, this is a big one, we got to take some action here?
So we're very similar to fire departments. We're paged out at the same time as them. Part of our prep work going into springs is that we work very closely with fire departments through training, letting them know kind of the expectations and terminology and tactics of how we want to fight the various types of fires. So Jared Labuse out of Watoma was actually the first one that would have made contact with Berlin Fire Department and County Highway D. While he was en route, he requested through DNR dispatch additional units to respond to that fire because you were starting to do the size up just off the smoke column and then what Berlin Fire Department was telling was happening on scene. So we mobilize our workforce, very similar to fire departments. And then when the first DNR person is on scene with the fire departments, generally command kind of transitions to DNR. And then we work collaboratively with our partners, being Sheriff's Office for evacuations, fire departments for structural protection, and an assistance on the wildland side. So I was part of the initial request and responded out of Wapaka. Probably closer to 5:30 is when I arrived on scene.
And Lucas, how do you and your colleagues make the determination of how many local departments to reach out to, given what you know about the fire at any given moment?
It starts up with what we call the size up, and we get that first in from the fire department, and we're looking for what fuel types the fire is burning in, the fire behavior, potentially how many structures are at risk. Then we also get DNR an DNR airplane overhead that helps us assess where that fire is moving into, and then we're also looking at fuels downwind. So it's a combination of all that, and really it's the fire potential growth that we're assessing when we make that resource order. And then we have to match that resource order with the fuel type. So in this case, normally we come to the table with a lot of bulldozers and with plows on the back, but bulldozers aren't real effective in marsh wet areas. They sink. So we need to order specialized equipment. We call them low ground units or marsh units. They have low ground pressure and can go and work out in the marsh. And then we also requested additional units from Fish and Wildlife Service out of Horicon and Necedah because they have additional specific equipment that can go into the marsh, and that was very critical.
Doug, can you talk about the conditions facing your crew there? You had the fire, you're trying to protect these buildings. As Lucas was mentioning, there's marsh, there were some wind conditions. Give us a sense of what you were up against here as you started, as the first on the scene to fight this fire.
Well, as the fire was going through the marsh, due to the wind, it was moving quite rapidly. We had flames anywhere from 10 to 30 feet tall at times. It's moving at us, so we're trying to be prepared, trying to make sure that our guys are in a safe location so nothing happens. Plus, then take care of the residents and the outbuildings. They had a barn and a pole type shed at this location. And then during all this, we're also calling our neighboring departments for equipment to help, knowing that we're going to need it too. So for us, it got pretty hairy for a while, but we got it under control to protect the buildings.
Lucas, what goes into determining when to evacuate, how wide an area to evacuate in the face of a fire, a quickly spreading fire like this one?
We base all our decisions off a priority list of life, property, resource, meaning we'll do everything to save a life and potentially sacrifice a home or a building as long as we're safe doing it. And we may let 15, 20 acres burn because we'll choose to protect a structure. So we'll look at how many structures are immediately threatened, and then we'll immediately go and start looking downwind of that fire because that fire is moving. So how many structures are downwind? And we'll also look at road closures because evacuation and road closures kind of going hand in hand to meet that number one priority of life safety.
Doug, physically, what were you doing here to stop this fire? Because people might think of, okay, you're extinguishing it, but there also might be fire breaks, that sort of thing. What were you and your fellow departments doing to stop this fire from reaching these structures?
We had a hose line stretched out around the structures that were attached to a normal fire truck. And then we have a UTV on tracks that we were trying to get out and get ahead of it a little bit. We had grass rigs, which are pickups with water on them up on County D, trying to keep it from getting too close to the highway. We prefer to fight the fire from the burnt side, but sometimes you have to be prepared to have it head on. Then we had other units coming in with more track units so we could get out in the marsh, get towards the fire and start suppressing it if we could.
Well, that's interesting. You're fighting the fire. That makes sense from the side that's already burnt as opposed to the spreading active fire zone. How much choice do you have in that, given the conditions, or are you sometimes stuck in that position of having to be out in front of it?
Well, we try to get behind it as soon as we can because winds change. The fire itself can help the winds change, and we just don't want nobody to get caught in the wrong spot at the wrong time. So as the fire's coming like this, when it was coming to the buildings, it did get to some shorter grass, so we were able to, it slows down when it gets to that, so we were able to work on the extinguishment. Once we got to that, then we could get on the backside of it. When we're up on the highway, you got the blacktop road, which is, so wide, so you can try to keep it contained there so it doesn't jump the road. And you got a little bit, because obviously the road won't burn, so you're on a little bit of a break there.
And Lucas, it sounds like you're sort of quarterbacking this whole thing over the 8-hour effort to contain the flames here. What kind of conditions are you watching? What kind of calls are you making as the situation evolves, changes, maybe really quickly?
Working with the National Weather Service to get a spot forecast. That's real key. So we're trying to anticipate what winds are going to do when RHs may change, the relative humidity may go up. Because really temperature, wind, relative humidity, those are the primary factors that really affect fire behavior. And knowing the later we go into the evening, the more the weather is on our side versus the middle of afternoon. So we're looking at that. And again, as incident commander, we're coordinating with the sheriff's department, any other partners such as Fish and Wildlife that may be bringing resources to the fire scene. I'm in contact with my representatives down in Madison so they can inform the governor and the secretary what's going on. And then also kind of laying out the overall priorities and objectives for the fire, and then coordinating the resources directly on that fire. As Doug was mentioning, holding County Highway D was real key to this. So we kind of had a burning out operation where we were lighting fire in advance of the main fire to remove fuel, widen that break, and then also wet down areas downwind of that fire. And that's where the fire departments became a real critical piece to holding County Highway D in this case.
Doug, this sounds grueling to me. Can you talk about the physical and mental demands, for that matter, on you and your crew as you're in the face of this fire?
Yeah, so it gets very hot. So one of the things we then had to do is find some water to bring into the situation for everybody to keep hydrated. For me, I was working up by Lucas, and it was demanding as far as they needed resources and we had to find them and, call our dispatch looking for help from lots of other fire departments and communities. So it does take a toll on it. The guys all did real well. We came back and we had a little talk about it and everybody was ready for bed.
We are talking about a multi-agency response to a 750-acre wildfire just a couple weeks back now in Green Lake County. Getting a firsthand look at what it takes to contain a fire like this, we've got Lucas Schmidt with the DNR's Forestry Department, Doug Dewhurst, interim fire chief of the Berlin Fire Department, first on the scene there. Lucas, 750 acres, you kept it down under 4 digits, which we've had much bigger fires spread in Wisconsin. If I have this right, no Well, no fatalities, I know. No structures lost. I can call this a win. Is that fair to say?
Yes, I would call it a win. Anytime you can have a fire get this big and have as many people respond as what they did with no injuries, no damage to property, that becomes a win for a negative situation.
And Lucas, how do we know that it's completely out, right? Because we could see, oh, great, there's no flames, but there's always the concern that there might be embers that can restart something if the wind picks up again. How do you confirm that we're done here?
So the day one shift, we did staff it overnight, and then we transitioned to a whole nother crew the following day. They worked it that entire day, and we had staff out on the third day. And then after that, we could not find any more hotspots at that time, but we're continuing to monitor it, meaning we'll have aircraft when they fly over look at it. We'll periodically go out and patrol and check the control lines. And we've had Mother Nature give us some well-needed precipitation here in the last week where it's contained, it's under control. We haven't just declared it out yet. I would expect that to be happening shortly in the future. Again, we like to err on the side of caution on a fire this big and make sure that we patrol it adequately so that there are no escapes after we get containment.
Doug, let's talk about training and preparation, because it sounds like you and your crew arrived at the scene knowing what you were doing. What kind of training goes into your department to make sure you're ready for an event like this?
We have fire meetings for training 2 Tuesdays a month, and we go through all our equipment. We work on it. At this time of year particularly, we make sure we get everybody refamiliarized with our grass rigs, our UTV, and we make sure everything's in proper working order, knowing that this is the time we're going to have, a chance for grass and or marsh fires. And anybody who wants to be a volunteer firefighter has to go through hours of training through a state certified course where they get a little bit of information on all types of fires. So.
And then, Lucas, what goes into preparing so you're ready to coordinate with, 2-digit numbers of different departments to make sure everybody's on the same page?
It's years in the making. We have a long history of working with fire departments in the state of Wisconsin. So we have mutual aid agreements that kind of sets the tone of expectations as far as payment as well as training with our partners. We also engage in individual fire department training as the DNR, specifically around wildland fire, to reinforce tactics, strategy, terminology, so that we're speaking the same language when we do have a large fire like this breakout. And that kind of gets to the expectations of what they can expect us to do and what we'll be asking them to do. And additionally, if I'm speaking for myself, it's taken 24 years to get the fire qualifications I have, where I can feel comfortable coming into a scene like this. This is the first time I ever worked with Doug. So if you think of never working with someone and coming into to co-manage a large incident like that, that can be stressful in itself, but maintaining those positive relationships in advance of the need is real key, where we can quickly introduce ourselves, give ourselves a little bit of space to be our own people and recognize that we're all here to help for the common cause of putting the fire out safely.
Doug, a lot of communities in Wisconsin rely on volunteer fire departments. I spoke to folks from the Cornell Fire Department in Wisconsin a while back. I'm blown away by the amazing work volunteer departments do. Do you want to put in a plug for people in communities with volunteer fire departments to consider it? Check out what it would take to get involved.
Everybody should take an interest if they can. And if it's something that you do have a true interest in, get a hold of your city hall, get a hold of your local fire department. I can guarantee you every single one of them needs help. There's never enough people. As we move forward, we're constantly looking for individuals that'd be interested in doing it.
Lucas, I think sometimes people might think, okay, well, hey, we're not California. Wisconsin's not a wildfire state. And I'm always thinking, hey, we have the most deadly wildfire in U.S. history, the Peshtigo fire. It's been a while. Wildfires obviously do happen here. What do you want the public to know, to be thinking about, especially during this wildfire season, to make sure they're not contributing to the next call that these departments get?
Wisconsin does have a lot of wildfires. Generally, we're speaking 1,500 to 2,000 every spring. It's our mission and goal to try to keep 95% of those fires less than 5 acres in size. So most of the time, the public doesn't even know they exist. But we are entering the most volatile time in Wisconsin, being as soon as snow melts until generally around June 1st. as we progress in spring, the woods will start burning more actively than the grasslands. Right now, primarily we're having fires in the grasslands, but when the pine starts burning in the end of April and early May, we can have running crown fires. 2 years ago, we had the Pallet Fire, which burned 700 acres and multiple structures near Coloma, and it does happen in Wisconsin. And again, some of our regulations help prevent that from having the same occurrence. So, number one, I would say don't burn in the springtime unless you absolutely have to. If you do have to, go to 188 WISPURN or go type burning permits under the DNR website, and you can see what the burning laws are. We do require burning permits in all areas of DNR protection from snow melt until June 1st, other areas a little throughout the summer. And it really restricts the burning to the hours of 6 p.m. to midnight because it's less dangerous then. And it requires daily authorization. So every day that you want to burn with a burning permit, you need to check the website or call that number, and that will let you know if we're allowing burning that day, because we shut burning off when we see, I guess, bad fire weather coming into the area where fires will have a higher likelihood of escaping.
We'll leave it there. Lucas, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome.
And Doug, thanks again for being with us.
Thank you.
That was Doug Dewhurst, interim fire chief of the Berlin Fire Department in Green Lake County, and Lucas Schmidt, forestry supervisor for the Department of Natural Resources based in Wapaka. They were both part of the response to the 750-acre Big Island Fire in Green Lake County 2 weeks ago today. Coming up on Wisconsin Today, hear about a class in lacrosse that helps bring a sense of awe and wonder into our daily lives.
Awe is this feeling that we get when we're in the presence of something big or vast, and we are able to kind of focus on something bigger than ourselves.
That's next here on WPR News. It's Wisconsin Today. I'm Rob Ferret. Here's something about me. I use the word awesome a lot in my daily life, right? For things that aren't really that awe-inspiring, you bring me the coffee I ordered. Awesome. You recorded that interview I did. Sarah, awesome. Thanks. That kind of thing. But awe has a deeper meaning. Experiencing awe can make us rethink the world around us and our place in it. And research suggests that experiences of awe may have long-term positive effects on our minds, bodies, and social connections. Tara DeLong is an associate teaching professor at the University of Wisconsin-La Crosse. In a new series at La Crosse Public Library, she's helping people find that elusive feeling. With students from her recreational therapy and mental health course, participants learn how to be in awe, even in small moments, with the hope of improving their well-being. Tara joins us now. Tara, welcome to Wisconsin Today.
Yes, my pleasure.
Well, as I've mentioned, I am responsible for degrading the meaning of the word awe. I'll say awesome to just about anything. Can you give us a sense, though, of what we're talking about when we're talking about this idea of actual awe and wonder?
Yeah. That's funny that you said that, because last night at our program, one of the students was like, yeah, awe. And it is one of those words that's really kind of hard to describe, or emotions and hard to describe. But really, the idea here is that awe is this feeling that we get when we're in the presence of something big or vast. And in that presence, we're really thinking about how we're a little bit smaller in the world, right? We are able to kind of focus on something bigger than ourselves. And so it's those encounters that we have that allow us to have this feeling of vast and mysterious things. And so I feel like it's that those moments where we have goosebumps. It's that warmth in our chest. It's those tears that come to our eyes unexpectedly. In that way that we might experience awe unexpectedly.
We're going to focus, I think, on the upside of awe, but there's awesome and there's awful, right? Awe historically wasn't necessarily something happy, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's really important to bring up. So I'm glad you did. It's not all pleasant, right? So awe has been used sort of negatively and continues to be negatively at times. And we can also think about, yes, natural wonders and beauty as awe, but we also know that the natural world creates trauma and turmoil and destruction, and that's pretty awful. So yes, this is not without, we're not pretending that there isn't another side or a shadow side to the use of awe or experiencing awe in different ways based on different experiences.
Do you have a moment of awe that you think about that maybe inspired some of the work you're doing?
Well, I'm a natural half empty kind of gal. And so, and I'm kind of surrounded by all these half full people. And I think for me, it was really about how can I feel a little more, a sense of awe and wonder in my life. And because I just feel like I'm sort of just naturally drawn to the half empty. And so I really love nature. I love to garden. And I think what I started to do is just capitalize on that. I live in a beautiful place. I live not only in Wisconsin, but I live on the west side of the state near the Mississippi River. And there is just such ample opportunity and it never gets old. And so I just started thinking about like, this never gets old. I'm never tired of eagles and water and nature. And so a couple of times a week, I walk with a friend. And that is really our goal. We call it our awe walk. I have it in my calendar as my awe walk. It's sacred time. I very, very rarely schedule over it. And we are on a search for these moments, these like little small moments, intersections of our lives as we are on this walk. And it's neighborhoods and it's the river and it's marshes and it's everywhere.
I'd heard about your idea of the awe walk, and I gave it a try this morning on my way to work, and I recorded a little bit of it to set this up. Okay, here is me trying to experience awe this morning. All right, I'm going to look for some awe in a place I don't usually expect to find it. The bus stop on the way into work in the morning. Not really in an awe-finding mood, but we got a pretty good sunset going. Sunrise. Yeah, it's the morning. Sun is rising over in the east there. Some really cool colors in the clouds, like blue and orange. It's cool. Am I filled with a feeling of awe? I'll work on it after I stop talking here. It's pretty cool, though, and it's something I don't always pay attention to. And Tara, trying that moment, trying to find awe in a very, very mundane part of my life makes me very curious about your awe walks. How do you get yourself in that mindset when you're going for this walk to find that wonder, to find that awe?
Yeah, I think such a good question. I think part of it is that you have to let go a little bit. It's not a whole hour of awe, right? It's like, what did you see? What were those moments? So your example of the sunset or the sunrise, sorry.
Yeah, I did the same
it's just
thing.
like you're curious about the colors and the changes in the sky, right? Those are things you wouldn't necessarily notice. And then paying attention to that. So oftentimes when you walk with friends, you often complain about things, right? And so it keeps us accountable to each other by saying, okay, we're looking for awe, right? So it's an interruption. It's a way to help that default brain kind of like reset. And I'll give you an example. So the other morning, we're walking through the marsh and you can see it's very still morning and just the tiniest ripples on the water. And I'm like, what is going on there, right? So like, I'm asking, I'm being curious, I'm wondering, these are things I haven't seen. There's a knowledge gap here. And I'm like, oh, that must be a muskrat. But, you couldn't see the head, you couldn't see anything. So even those small things, I mean, I'm okay. I can admit that I didn't know that was a muskrat, So I think that setting it up for you, it's trying to pay attention a little bit. It's trying to be more in the moment in a way that doesn't feel like I'm judging. And sometimes when we think about practices that help and or support well-being and our mindset, it's like meditation and relaxation. All those take some time and effort to like sit in the quiet, right? And be present and try to manage the suffering of quiet and just focusing on my breathing. And what I love about this is that it's active, and that works for me. I like being active. I like to be actively involved and being and mindful at the same time. And so this is something that I feel like contributes to my well-being, but it supports connection. It allows me to get out and be in nature. So all those things that I value. And, it's leisure.
Something that really strikes me there is you're talking about attentiveness and curiosity to the world around us. And there's a real roadblock there. I was holding it in my hand to record my impression of that sunrise, my phone. It is really easy to tunnel out the rest of the world that we can maybe find that awe and that wonder in. Read that same website for the 50th time this week or something like that.
Yeah. And having to sort of choose to put down that device, take a deep breath, be intentional about paying attention. The art of noticing is just that. If we set out to notice things, we're going to notice things. One of the exercises that I have my students do on the first week of classes is pick an ordinary item and now head out to the world. And I want you to tell me where you see these ordinary items. And so we're talking about, fire hydrants or benches or exit signs or, a number of things. And they come back after a week and they're like, holy cow, I had not ever noticed that there were so many of, blank. And again, it's just like reinforcing that for our brain. So we can learn these skills. We're stuck with these devices. I don't think they're going away. And I think we have to learn how to coexist with them in ways that turns off that sort of addictive want for more. Our brains are hardwired for that. And so knowing that, being able to practice that, those are all really important. And we can also acknowledge it, that this is a distraction, right? This phone, this computer, the demands of those things. But is it a demand 24/7? Is that what the world expects of me? Or is that what I am just defaulting to?
Tara DeLong is with us from UW-La Crosse, helping us discover a sense of awe and wonder in the world. One thing that'll get me, and it's a mind perspective thing too, is the moon, right? Sometimes I'm like, oh, there's the moon in the sky, whatever. And then sometimes I'm like, so somebody in Mexico sees it? That's the same moon I'm looking at. Somebody in China, same moon. Somebody in ancient Greece is writing about the moon. That was the same moon. Just having that bigger than myself kind of perspective of just the vastness of the world and all the people who've shared the experience of looking at this thing. Sometimes I can get myself to that mindset. Is that part of the story? Is that part of how we're seeking that awe?
Yeah, I think that's really what's evoking it, right? This realization that there is more to this life than just like maybe me and my self-focus, right? So there's more than just me. There is this bigger world, and there's all these things out there seeing the same thing. Or when I'm looking up, of course, like the Milky Way, the sky, right? The wonders of that. But I also sometimes think about astronauts, looking down on the Earth, and like we are but a speck, and I am one speck across a billion other specks in terms of one person in this space. And so sometimes that for some people doesn't feel awe-inspiring, right? They just feel like insignificant. But when we say it or when we're talking about that, it's like not insignificant, but also thinking about how we could be pro-social with that feeling, right? So that moon, all those other people who see that moon and appreciate that moon are with me in this appreciation. And that is sort of a sense of like a connection, right? I mean, that keeps us connected. So some people feel less lonely when they start thinking about that vastness of this world that we have. And as we know, loneliness is an emerging mental health challenge in our communities. And so if there are ways for us to insert awe or utilize awe in ways that helps people have better sense of, connection or belonging, then this is a positive opportunity.
Yeah, you work on, among other things, health education and mental health. Can cultivating this sense of attention and awe have mental health benefits?
Yeah, I think Dash's research really kind of talks about some of what they saw or what they found in terms of those benefits of brief doses of awe. So what they suggest is that, we are experiencing awe, whether we know it or not, and 2 or 3 times a week, even when we're not trying, right? So if we start paying attention to, again, as I had proclaimed earlier, my half-empty self, if we start paying attention to those things, we're going to see the things we're paying attention or looking for. And then what happens is that now we've activated some of these qualities that lead to better health outcomes. So things like improved immune systems, knowing that I can be in those moments lowers my stress. It helps me reason. I guess some of the research suggests that we are sharper in terms of our brain functioning when we're paying attention or experiencing those feelings of awe and wonder. It brings a sense of expanded time because we're out of the self, right? We're not just so focused on me. I'm able to focus on, again, maybe kindness or this sense of selflessness or perspective. And all of those things contribute to a sense of belonging, a sense of connection. And that connection is really builds some mental health, quality mental health for people. And it's not necessarily about illness, but it's about how do we improve health. And that is, I think that's a powerful way to be proactive. And this is accessible to everyone. And I'm not suggesting it's an answer or a cure for something. It's really, are you in your space, are you able to cultivate a feeling of awe that helps you feel like you're connected and that you belong in this place and that you have some significance and that you can contribute. And all of those things lead us to purpose and being part of a community. And I think that is part of the answer to some of this distance that people feel and isolation that people feel in their daily lives.
Tara, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for sharing your work with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
Tara DeLong is an associate teaching professor in recreational therapy at UW La Crosse. She's helping people find awe in a series of classes at the La Crosse Public Library. A question for you based on one part of that conversation. Do you ever feel like your phone gets in the way of connecting with the world, of appreciating the world around you, the people around you, or landscapes, or what have you? Have you found ways to resist that temptation to pick up and look at your phone whenever you have a moment standing about? Let us know. Email wisconsintoday@wpr.org. That's wisconsintoday@wpr.org. Hey, if you're a fan of The Lord of the Rings, the books and or the movies, did you know there's a big Wisconsin connection? Not in the creation of the books. I don't think author J.R.R. Tolkien ever visited us here. But Marquette University hosts a Tolkien archive. We've talked about that here on Wisconsin Public Radio. And the cartographer who mapped out the world of The Lord of the Rings in the Atlas of Middle-earth did it here in Wisconsin and was a member of the Oshkosh City Council at one point. We're going to hear that story next week on the show. Right now, I want to hear from Tolkien fans. What do the books and the movies mean to you? And do you love those maps of Middle-earth, the ones in the original books, or did you have a copy of that Atlas of Middle-earth created in Wisconsin? Tell us about it. Email wisconsintoday@wpr.org. That's wisconsintoday@wpr.org. Or you can call 888-642 0232. Wisconsin Today is the work of a team of producers, hosts, and technical directors. Learn more about us at WPR.org/Wisconsin Today. I'm Rob Ferret. You're listening to WPR News.